Hello and welcome to another Doctor's Assistant 1 video, and today I'm doing a video on why I dislike Doctor Who, the Crimson Horror. Jesus Christ, the things I do for you people. No, but the thing is, it's weird. I've literally just watched the episode and I just feel like I don't even know what to say about it. The thing is, it's not like one of those episodes that enrage me, like, say, Asylum of the Daleks or Hellbent, or, I don't know, like, it's kind of, you know when people say in Series 1 of Doctor Who, most people anyway, not everyone, but most people's main conception of what the bad episodes in Series 1 of the new series of Doctor Who is usually Long Game and Boomtown. But they're dull, or they're slow, or they're not that eventful, in contrast to all the other episodes surrounding them, right? But the thing is, if you had an episode like Boomtown or Long Game in something like this series, or this half of the series, and next to something like the Crimson Horror, that'd look fucking spectacular compared to this crap. I think the thing is, I could be more merciful on the Crimson Horror in this series if it wasn't for the fact that it's part of Doctor Who, so I have, surprisingly enough, quite a high standard of what I think Doctor Who should be, or the quality of Doctor Who, and I think this will get me a lot of flack probably, but when most people are like, oh, the classic Doctor Who is just, running up and down corridors and it's bland, it's boring, it's wobbly sets, it's this and that, and not that, innovative or interesting visually or visual effects wise, or it's not, it doesn't grip you in the same way that a modern Doctor Who episode does for some fans, which is fine, but I think with the Crimson Horror, I feel like it's a classic Doctor Who episode in the worst possible way of meaning that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think there are really good classic Doctor Who episodes and the scripts hold up and the really good episodes, like, say, take for instance something like Talons of Weng-Chiang, which I watched, I want to say, back over in the 10 bajillion week holiday before I started college again, and that's also set in Victorian London, or the Victorian times, like Crimson Horror, but the thing is, Crimson Horror just feels like a shell and really sort of hollow, and like it has no substance in contrast to something like Talons of Weng-Chiang. Yeah, granted they had 6 parts to, 6 weeks to flesh it out, and yeah, you could argue there is a bit of padding, maybe. I mean, I don't think there is really from what I remember of it, maybe a little bit, a smidge, but then the alternative is having something like the Crimson Horror, which is like a 45-minute episode where, there's 2 scenes literally where the Doctor and Clara say something along the lines of, oh, let's use this chair. Or the Doctor literally is like, oh, I have a sonic screwdriver, I have a chair. Uses the chair instead, and then the Doctor uses the chair again, and it's like, really, like that, if someone came up to me and was like, Matthew, the Doctor's Assistant 1, what do you think, what do you think best defines Doctor Who, or not defines, but what episode best describes Doctor Who? And that I would definitely point away from an episode like the Crimson Horror. It's the opposite of that. It's what I don't think this episode is Doctor Who to me, and that is a pretty bad way of describing it. I mean, what I will say, a little fun fact is, what's weird is, this is the Matt Smith action figure here, but what's weird is he should be wearing this costume in this episode, but he's not. He's not wearing the purple costume. He's wearing a sort of very dark, I want to say either brown or black costume, sort of tweed jacket with white stripes up and down, across, and down it, which I think's really cool actually. I really like that jacket, but I hate it when they do that sometimes, when they change the Doctor's costume halfway through a series, or for one episode, or a handful, because, yeah, they did that in this episode. Granted, you might not be able to tell because of the amount of fog they use in this episode. Like, I get it, it's Victorian London, but you don't have to use fog a lot. The music it's okay in places, but I think it's a bit too over the top. I think it's because the direction is fairly dull. I mean, the direction's okay and that, but I think I would be more merciful about this story, about the Crimson Horror, if it wasn't for the fact that it's a show where this guy is the main lead, right? But this guy, he's barely even in the episode. He's barely even in the episode, so by the time he gets introduced into the episode partway through, you have to do this elongated sort of flashback that's pretty, just sort of laborious and kind of boring. I mean, it looks visually fairly pleasing because they do this cool effect thing where it looks all old-timey like, right? But then that means that by the time you get to the conclusion, you've barely got anything to do with the conclusion, and then it just feels like, what in the name of Deus Ex Machina? How did that T-Rex get there? Type ordeal, And how bad's this that I feel like the character of the villain character, I can't even remember her name, and I literally just watched the episode. How bad is that? But how bad is this as well? That I feel like, although the Daleks are the main enemy of the Doctor and his race, right? And yet in this story, I felt more sort of on edge with this humanoid woman villainess nutjob of a character because she was unhinged, she was unpredictable, and she actually had a gun and shot at the Doctor not once but twice. That's more than a Dalek's ever done. So we can't even get Daleks to actually kill people and use the actual sort of effect of where it's all blue and then you see the skeleton, because apparently that costs too much. What? The only redeeming feature that I can think of, or two redeeming features I can think of this episode, is that it's a decent story if it was put in the context of, say, a Paternoster Gang spin-off. If this was in a series like that, I would be giving this a lot more praise. But because it's in the framework of Doctor Who, it just falls flat for me because it's vapid, it's boring, it's dull, it's not interesting. Granted, it's not got an old sort of golden oldie like the Cybermen or the Daleks or the Time Lords and just shat all over them, like the episodes that really pisses me off and that really gets me enraged. But here it's just dull, boring, and has no substance. And I think that's not what I think of when I think Doctor Who, and that's not what I want from Doctor Who. And I think Doctor Who isn't that to me, And I think that's why if someone was to say what episode really doesn't depict Doctor Who well or is a bad episode of Doctor Who, I would point to an episode like this, because this is, again, the sets are very narrow and just, reused and they go, they seem to go back and forth quite a bit and recycle the same sort of sets and very various locations and stuff. And a lot of it seems to be in a studio, sort of corridors and sets sort of stuff. And that's why, again, it gives me sort of classic Doctor Who vibes, but the difference is something like, as I said before, like Talons of Weng-Chiang, or, I don't know, Remembrance of the Daleks, or, I don't know, Battlefield, or just any classic Who episode. Just a lot of the better Doctor Who classic stories feel a lot more, sort of, have a lot more substance to them than this. This is just dull, really, and the creature, Mr. Swede, looks kind of non-threatening, really. He's hyped up to be this thing, and then he's just this weird parasite thing on this woman's chest of sorts, and it's okay, what? Yeah, his nectar's pretty volatile and toxic, but it's not like he can really physically harm anyone or anything. It just looks a bit gross and a bit repulsive, but besides that, the other redeeming feature or redeeming thing about this story is that I think it could work. Well, firstly, it could work as a spin-off episode for Paternoster Gang thing. Then yeah, I think it would be better. But the second thing was I've always found the relationship between the blind character and the Doctor fairly decent and portrayed fairly well as well in this story. I don't feel like Clara does that much. The Doctor barely does anything. He just looks ridiculous when he's all pink and that in this story as well, going like a zombie and that. It's just what the hell were they thinking when they made this? Like, and the ending as well, like, those kids are, like, blackmailing Clara, like, oh, we're gonna say that you're a time traveller, and it's like, what? They're kids, and what? You're getting blackmailed by these kids. It's, like, ridiculous. Yeah, The Crimson Horror is a very dull, very unimaginative, dull story that I think, you know, people shit on the next story, which is Nightmare in Silver, which I think I've already done my thoughts on, or why I like Nightmare in Silver, and surprisingly enough, I do like it. I think it's not the best story ever, don't get me wrong, but it's better than Crimson Horror. Like, Crimson Horror is fucking dull, and just, I think because it has this guy in it, the Doctor in it, I think I want him to be there, and I want it to tell an interesting story, and be interesting and fun, and I don't know, there's too many jokes. It tonally just doesn't feel like there's any cohesion or it just doesn't feel like it gels. Like, one minute you've got a joke, next minute you've got, you know, this psychotic woman saying horrible things to a blind woman, her blind daughter, then you've got another funny joke, or, you know, the Doctor running around, and then you've got, you know, another bit where the woman's pointing a gun at a blind daughter. You know, it just feels very out of place. And oddly enough, both the way they resolve the episode is very strange and bizarre. Both the characters end up dying. Like, the woman, the evil woman person, again, who I can't even remember her name, she ends up dying, and then Mr. Sweet ends up getting killed as well. So the two bad guys end up just dying. How friggin' weird's that? Like, you know, of a way, like, I don't know, it's just weird. Like, it just feels weird. Even the Doctor's, like, just doesn't even know how to react to it, and all Matt Smith's Doctor, doesn't even know how to react to it, because it's just so odd an ending, really. And that's another way you could just describe this story, odd, really. But yeah, I'm surprised it's even made by the same person who made, or did, Empress of Mars and, you know, Unquiet Dead, because they're brilliant stories, in my opinion. You know, and this is bottom of the barrel, really crap stuff. I'd give this story about, what, I don't know, a 3 out of 10? A 2, 3, somewhere between there, 2.5, I don't know, like, out of 10, like, down at the bottom of the barrel. Yeah, I mean, I think Closing Time is worse than this story, for example, and I think I gave that a 3 out of 10. So yeah, maybe, I don't know, anywhere between a 2 to maybe a 4. I'm not 100% sure on the rating, but yeah, I don't like this story. It's very dull and unimaginative and just not Doctor Who to me. So yeah, thanks for watching. Comment, rate and subscribe.